everyone, it's Steffi from the Novelty Corner, and today I'm here to talk about Mine to Possess by Nalini Singh. For those of you who are new to my channel, I am currently rereading the Psy-Changeling Series and filming individual videos on all of the books. These books are filled with spoilers, so be aware of that going into it. And I am doing a bit of a deep dive onto the main plot of the book, as well as the world building bits and pieces that pop up in each new book. I'm a huge fan of the series. I'm all caught up to date with current books. So this time I'm coming through and I'm really looking at how Nalini has woven all of these different plot points together throughout the course of the books. I'm also one of the co-hosts for the Psy-Changeling Readathon, which is taking place from January until June. I will leave a link to the Discord down below if you'd like to join us. At the end of January, we're going to be talking about the first 3 books in the series. I have already talked about those in videos. I'm going to leave a link to the playlist on the screen as well as down below. So if you would like to check out the previous videos because you haven't seen them, feel free to do so. Just be aware all of these videos do have spoilers. I'm not going to hold the book up for the whole video because that's just going to make my hand hurt. But in Mine to Possess, we return to the Dark River Sentinel pack, which is the Leopard pack, and they live in San Francisco. They are one of the 2 dominant shifter packs. This time our couple is Clay Bennett, who is one of the Dark River Sentinels, so one of sort of the lieutenants of the pack, and also Talon McCade, who is a human. I'm going to give the trigger warnings for this book right off the bat. There is mention of sexual abuse of a minor that happens prior to the starting of the book. It is mentioned many times in the story, but the actual act is not explicitly written about. It's just mentioned. And also you have mention of a set of foster parents who were also turned out to be child serial killers. That again is something that's mentioned that has been part of the character's past and isn't explicitly detailed in the story. And as for the tropes, it is obviously a fated mates story. We do have shifters and we also have childhood friends to lovers in this book as well. All right, so let's get started. At the beginning of this book, we meet Talon McCade, who is a human who has tracked down Clay Bennett, who she knew from her past. She finds him at a bar in San Francisco, and we discover that they knew each other in the past. However, they haven't seen each other for nearly 2 decades, ever since Clay quite viciously murdered Talon's foster father. As this story goes on, we begin to learn that Talon's foster parents were actually child serial killers who kidnapped children. They didn't often kill their foster kids because that would obviously raise suspicion. However, it is hinted at that her foster father was also abusing her from the time that she was 3 years old. Talon and Clay lived in the same apartment complex, so he was her only friend at that time. And when he discovered everything that was going on, he defended her. And as a result, he ended up spending time in a juvenile correctional facility. Talon has sought out Clay because she works for an organization called Shine, which is a group that assists disadvantaged children and disadvantaged youth. And she comes to Clay because she works with a group of kids, some of whom are missing and also some who have been found murdered. There is one enforcement officer who is investigating the case because he truly believes that there is something there. However, they don't have a lot of support from anyone else. And Talon believes that Clay, being a Dark River Sentinel, might be able to help her track down one of her missing kids. So this is where we're introduced to Max Shannon, who does get his own book later on. He is a human enforcement cop. Once he works out that he can actually trust Talon and Clay, he shares information that he has uncovered, which is that there's more than the kids that Talon knew about that have gone missing and turned up dead. And there's actually 15 cases that he's found that are all kids who have connections to Shine. So at this point, they're not sure whether Shine is the issue or whether there is a mole inside Shine who is betraying information about these kids and setting them up to be taken. Because of the investigation, Talon's apartment is ransacked, and so she ends up staying with Clay, who decides that she can't stay anywhere else. He wants to look after her. This is despite the fact that they've got some very unresolved feelings about not having seen each other for all these years, because Clay actually believed that Talon had been dead, and Talon had been the one to ask people to tell Clay that she was dead because she wanted him to move on with his life and not worry about having to protect her all the time, and he's really unhappy with that. While she is staying with Clay though, she does reveal to him that there's something not quite right with her brain. She's been seeing specialists and they can't quite work out what's going on. All they can agree on is that it looks like something is causing her brain to eat itself, and that there is a high likelihood that in the next few years she will probably die from it. One night they have a huge argument and Talon ends up entering a fugue state, and she's talked about having these where she just basically can't remember anything that's happened during a period of time. And Clay notices that during this state she sort of reverts back to a childlike state, and afterwards they have a discussion and they talk a lot about her traumatic past, the events that happened, Clay's role in it, in the fact that, you know, he killed her foster father in front of her when she was quite young. And there's also a discussion around the fact that one of Talon's coping mechanisms growing up was sleeping around, and how she thought that that would help her to feel something, except that it never did. And this initially is a source of contention between the two of them, because Clay doesn't know why she valued herself so little. And that's where Talon says, well, you know, this is a result of trauma. And she had been seeing professional help and was seeing a psychologist and getting support that way, and had gotten her life back on track and was now working for Shine, because she was now in a place where she wanted to help other people and she didn't want them to have the same life that she had. We sidestep sort of into the overarching plot line at the moment, which is with the Psy, who are currently designing an implant technology that would create a Psy hive mind. And one of the Psy counselors, Ming Labon, ends up moving the head Psy researcher, Ashaya Aline, to a new facility. This becomes important later on, because in this facility they are testing out the new implant and testing the implication on minds that have a Psy-like ability. We also discover that Ashaya may not necessarily be working on this project of her own free will, because the council is holding her son Keenan hostage. And again, this becomes important later on. Max Shannon ends up giving Talon the files of the missing kids in the hopes that she can see a pattern. Talon is quite good at recognizing patterns. It's a quirk that she has. And she ends up working alongside Tamsin, who is the Dark River healer. And they look at the kids' medical scans to see if there's anything that might have been missed, because they all believe that this investigation hasn't been handled to the same extent as it would be if it was sort of a high profile case. And eventually they all realize that these kids all had a special ability. So they were gifted in some way, whether it was in maths or music or language. They all had a really strong talent. And this is where it's pointed out that as one of the kids that was helped by Shine growing up, Talon has an eidetic memory, and that's her sort of enhanced human skill. As the investigation progresses, Max is attacked and hospitalized, and as a result, Talon and Clay meet with the Shine director, Devraj Santos. Again, is another character who gets his own book later on, who begins to share information around the fact that he believes that the Psy are involved in these kidnappings of these kids. He eventually drip feeds information to them that a lot of the kids that Shine helps are actually descendants of the Forgotten, the Psy who chose not to be part of the Psy-net under silence and broke away from them and found new lives outside of the Psy-net. And as a result of the information that Dev, throughout the story, we do get these little sort of moments with John, who is the missing boy that Talon is trying to find. And we find out that he is in a medical facility. There is another young girl there, Nor, and that they are being experimented on. Sounding familiar? Starting to tie into Ashaya's story. One night Talon has a medical emergency, and later on Sasha basically tells Clay off for not confronting his feelings and for being honest with Talon. And it's at this point that Clay recognizes that Talon is his mate and that he needs to do something about it. As their investigation continues, Talon and Clay end up meeting with Judd and Brenner as Judd shares information on the implant protocol, so that the Dark River Sentinels are now up to date with everything that's going on. And I have a growing theory that Judd might be in just about every book, so I will keep you posted because he's been in every book so far. Ashaya ends up contacting Talon through Shine anonymously and offers to help with a rescue plan for these two kids. So we've discovered that her alliance is not truly to this project. She is actively working against it, and she has decided she will help get these kids out if Talon can organize for that to happen. Dorian and Clay assist Talon with this plan, and as a sort of cover, the ghost, so that shadowy figure in the Psy-net who is actively working against the council, sets in motion a distraction which results in the assassination of Marshall, who is one of the Psy counselors. Because of this distraction, the security on the medical facility is reduced, and that results in Clay, Dorian and Talon being able to get John and Nor out. Talon confronts Clay about being mated. Being human, she actually can't sense that. And once he confirms it, she accepts it. And Talon then realizes that she's not feeling the same effects of her medical condition as she was earlier. And it's revealed that because she is part Psy, very, very small part Psy, what she actually needed was a network like the Psy-net, or like what Sasha and Faith have within the Dark River Sentinel Pack, as feedback. And because she wasn't getting it, her brain was overloading. And once she's accepted as a mated pair within the Dark River pack, she's getting just that tiny little bit of feedback that she needs in order to be healthy. The two of them decide that they want to take in John and Nor, who are both orphans, and John is quite enamored with the Dark River Sentinels, especially when he finds out that even though he's human, he could work his way up through the ranks as a Dark River soldier and sentinel, because Dorian has set the way, because Dorian is a shifter who can't shift. So that's the main plotline for the story. In terms of world building, there are some really interesting things that come up. At the beginning of every book, we get a prologue, and that sort of sets some of the history of the Psy up for the book. So in this one, we'd find out that in 1973, because this book is set in 2080 or something like that, in 1973, when the Psy implemented silence, that there was a group of Psy who broke away from the Psynet, and those were the ones who chose not to live under silence, and that becomes the group of Forgotten, and they do pop up here and there within the greater world building in later books. It is our first introduction to Shine, the organisation that works with disadvantaged youth. We do get that backstory that they are actively tracking down descendants of the Forgotten to support and help them in any way that they need. And they're not just working with those kids who do show those high level abilities, they are also keeping an eye on the rest of their family to support them as well if needed. It's the first time that we're formally introduced to Ashara Aline, the MSI who is working on the implant protocol. She's actually the heroine in the next book. I've forgotten how much I enjoyed her character, because we don't truly understand all of her motives. We know that she's working on this project against her will. We know that her silence protocol hasn't broken, but she feels a great deal of affection for her son Keenan, and that he's been taken, and that she's willing to do anything to keep him safe, including make a deal with the Dark River Sentinels, because essentially what happened was she agreed to get out the Shine kids if they promised to help her in return to retrieve her son. And it makes me really excited to read the next book, because I haven't reread that book, and I love Dorian, and I just remembered how much I liked Ashire as well. In this book, we also see the start of a pact between the Dark River Sentinels and the Rat Shifters in the city. There's only a handful of them and they live underground, but they are really good spies. And throughout the story, they actually are some of the characters who are gathering information for Dark River, and they do play a bigger role later on. This book really does set up sort of the next two books, which follow two of the Dark River Sentinels. So the next book follows Dorian and obviously Ashire, and then book 6 is Mercy's book, and it foreshadows a lot because Mercy has been set up as the liaison between the Dark River and Snowdancer packs, and it's something that she doesn't really like. She's complaining about it all through this book because she finds the wolves really annoying, and she ends up having a relationship with a wolf. So I'm really excited to get to the next two books. I do love Mercy's book. As a result of the assassination of the Psy Counselor Marshall, Anthony Kyriakis, who is Faith Nightstar's father, is voted into the council, which is really important because Anthony is quite moderate in terms of the council members. And also this book was the first time where the council members deferred to one of Caleb Krychek's decisions. He just makes an observation that they don't even realise that they've deferred to him. And that is also really important. And then my last section is sort of just some fun facts that I picked up as I was reading. I quite enjoyed the relationship that Clay had with Faith Nightstar. It's only a small part of the story, and in a lot of cases it's used to show that Talon does have feelings for Clay because she gets quite jealous whenever Clay brings up Faith. But it was nice to see that Faith was able to have relationships with other pack members outside of Vaughn, because we all know my feelings on Vaughn. I'm not a big fan of him. And that she is integrating herself into the pack and developing those friendships with people. I also continue to adore Tamsin, who is the Dark River healer. I love her, I love her mate Nate, and I love the two twins who are just utterly adorable. But in this book, Tamsin really spends a lot of time telling people like it is, especially when it comes to relationship advice, and sort of, you can just tell she's rolling her eyes at all of the male's behaviour, and I just adore her. And then just some random things about Dorian that I'd forgotten. So Dorian is the Dark River shifter who can't shift. We knew that he was an architect, but in this book, Talon finds out that he's an architect. She doesn't quite believe him. He spends quite a lot of the book flirting with Talon to annoy Clay, and eventually it becomes this sort of game between Talon and Dorian. So she doesn't believe him when he tells her he's an architect, but then he also has a side hobby of flying, and we also find out that he has continued to spar with Judd on a regular basis, which I think was something that was hinted at in one of the books. And the comment is made that despite the fact that Dorian can't shift, he can hold his own in a fight against a former Psy Arrow / assassin, which I think is really interesting. But yes, that is my thoughts and bits and pieces that are going on with this series. I was pleasantly surprised by this one. I couldn't remember whether or not I had any strong feelings one way or another about Clay. He's still not my favourite, but I like him a lot better than I like Vaughn. And Talon, I think, was a really interesting character because she's just so determined to help these kids, and I think that really stood her in good stead as a character who is interesting. But I am extremely excited for the next 2 books, so stay tuned. In the comments below, let me know if you have read Mine to Possess or if you're planning on reading it. And if you are planning on reading it, don't forget to join us for our Psy-Changeling Readathon. We will be talking about Mine to Possess at the end of February, so I'm a little bit ahead of everyone else. I'm looking forward to it. So I'll leave all those details down below. I hope that wherever you are in the world, you are staying safe and healthy, and I'll see you all very soon in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye everyone.